No one in the quiet village ever understood why the children of Alderwood slept so peacefully. Why not a single nightmare, not a single scream, had ever echoed through the night. Parents believed it was a blessing, a strange but welcome sign that their little ones are protected by something gentle and unseen. They were wrong, because on one moonless night, when the air felt too still and shadows seemed too aware, Dracula returned, drawn by the silence of the children who never cried out, never called for help, the children who, for reasons no one dared to imagine, could not scream. And as the villagers slept, he came wandering through the fog, through the trees, and into the heart of Alderwood, searching for the ones whose silence had called him across centuries. What he found was something even he had not expected. What happened that night would tear open secrets buried for generations, and reveal the terrifying truth behind why those children had never screamed at all. Before we begin, one question remains. What does a monster fear when the children themselves make no sound? Before we begin, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and turn on notifications so you never miss our chilling stories about Dracula. The night began with a silence so dense that even the wind seemed afraid to pass through Alderwood. The village rested at the edge of a vast, ancient forest, a place whose trees grew too close together, as if whispering to each other in a language older than the soil itself. People always said Alderwood was peaceful, but there was something wrong with the way the quiet settled. It wasn't calm. It was expectant, watching, waiting. On this particular night, the moon had vanished behind a sheet of heavy clouds, leaving the sky black and depthless. Darkness pressed against every home, every window, every sleeping child. Parents slept soundly, believing their village was safe, believing the strange serenity of Alderwood was a gift and not a warning. They had lived their entire lives with this unnatural hush, never once questioning why their children never woke crying, never whimpered in fear, never screamed. Not once, not ever. Only one person sensed something was off. Eleanor Hargrove, a young schoolteacher living alone near the edge of the woods. She had always felt a peculiar discomfort in Alderwood, as if something in the forest kept its eyes fixed on her. Tonight, the feeling was worse. She sat upright in bed, heart beating in her ears, unable to name the sensation crawling through her chest. It wasn't fear, not yet, but anticipation and dread. Outside, the fog rolled in like a slow tide, blanketing the village in thick strands of white. It curled around houses and drifted through fences, moving with purpose, like a living thing searching for something or someone. And hidden deep within that fog came the first sign of the nightmare about to unfold, a soft, deliberate footstep, then another, and another. They weren't the steps of a wandering animal. They weren't the clumsy shuffles of a drunk stumbling home. These footfalls were calm, controlled, powerful, ancient. They belonged to something that knew exactly where it was going, because it had been here before. Centuries ago, Eleanor rose from bed and stepped toward her window. The fog pressed against the glass like a face leaning in, watching her. She shuddered, reaching for the curtain, but before she could close it, she saw movement. A tall figure, impossibly tall, walked through the fog toward the village square. A long black cloak trailed behind him, gliding over the ground like a shadow detached from its owner. His posture was regal, almost graceful, as though he didn't walk so much as drift. The fog parted around him, afraid to cling too closely, and the darkness itself seemed to bend, eager to serve him. Eleanor's breath froze in her lungs. She didn't know his name, but every bone in her body did. Dracula. The name seemed to pulse in her skull like a memory she had never lived but still somehow knew. Legends whispered of him, of a night centuries ago when Alderwood's children vanished, not with screams, but with silence. The old stories were always dismissed as superstition. But seeing the figure now, moving with such inhuman stillness, Eleanor understood that the legends were not stories. They were warnings. And the warnings had come too late. In the Thompsons' house across the street, a small child shifted in his sleep. Little Noah Thompson, only 6 years old, lay on his back with his eyes open, wide open. He stared at the ceiling without blinking, without breathing deeply, without making a sound. His lips parted slightly, but no voice escaped. He couldn't scream. He never could. None of the children could. Parents had simply accepted it, calling it a strange Alderwood trait. But it wasn't a trait. It was a curse. A curse placed long ago to keep the village alive. A curse that protected no one, only silenced them. As Dracula passed the Thompson home, Noah's pupils expanded, swallowing the blue of his eyes completely. His small hand twitched, as if reaching toward something only he could see. A soft vibration passed through the air, like the hum of a far-off cello string pulled taut. Dracula stopped. His head turned slowly toward the house, as though drawn by an invisible thread connecting him to the silent children inside. His lips lifted, not in a smile but in recognition. He had found them, the children who never screamed, the ones whose silence had called him back after so many years. Eleanor backed away from the window, her heart slamming against her ribs. She didn't know what hunted Alderwood, or what tied the children to this ancient terror. But she knew one thing. Tonight was only the beginning, and Alderwood's silence was finally breaking. The fog thickened until the village was nothing more than a ghostly outline hidden beneath layers of white. The street lamps flickered softly, their light swallowed almost instantly, struggling to illuminate even a few inches ahead. Within the suffocating darkness, Dracula continued forward, silent, focused, and guided by a presence older than the village itself. Eleanor pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her breath. Every instinct told her to run, but something stronger, an unfamiliar voice within her, whispered that running wouldn't matter. Not from him. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her coat, thrown over a chair, and stared back at the window. Dracula had vanished from sight, swallowed by the fog. Alderwood felt like a closed room with no doors, and he was already inside. Across the village, the children began waking one by one. Not fully, just enough. Their eyes opened in perfect synchrony, pupils dilated so widely that their irises disappeared. They didn't twitch or shift or cry. They simply stared, at their ceilings, at their walls, at nothing, or perhaps at something only they could see. In the Miller household, young Leah sat up slowly, her tangled hair falling over her face. Her mother, asleep beside her, didn't notice the sudden movement. Leah placed one hand on her chest, as though she felt a string pulling from deep within. Her lips parted, silently mouthing something. Words without sound, like a prayer spoken into a void. Across the room, the window unlatched by itself. A cold breeze swept in. Leah didn't flinch. Instead, she nodded, as if answering a call. Dracula was still nowhere in sight, but his presence moved through Alderwood like a temperature shift, sliding under doors, curling into hallways, brushing across sleeping families. It wasn't magic. It wasn't a spell. It was memory. The memory of fear that had once drowned this village. The curse that had silenced its children. Eleanor, her coat now on and her hands shaking, stepped outside. The fog swallowed her instantly. The air tasted metallic, thick, unnatural. She strained her ears for any sound. Footsteps, whispers, even a breath. But the silence pressed harder, an oppressive weight that made her chest tighten. "Hello," she whispered. "Is anyone?" Her voice died before it traveled an inch. It was as if the fog devoured it. The silence wasn't just the absence of sound. It was a living thing. Eleanor moved slowly toward the square, her boots making no noise against the cobblestone. As she approached the fountain at the center of Alderwood, a cracked stone relic hundreds of years old, she saw a figure sitting on its edge. A small figure. A child. She froze. It was Noah Thompson. The little boy sat perfectly still, legs dangling over the fountain, staring straight ahead. His eyes were wide, but they didn't blink. Eleanor approached carefully, kneeling in front of him. "Noah," she whispered, touching his shoulder gently. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Where are your parents?" No reaction. His chest rose and fell shallowly. His pupils were completely black now, swallowing the blue she'd noticed earlier. Eleanor felt a chill crawl up her spine, not just from the boy's eerie stillness, but from a feeling that she wasn't alone. "Why are you out here?" she tried again. This time, Noah's mouth moved, not to speak, to breathe out a single whisper of cold air that drifted into the fog like smoke. Eleanor leaned closer. Noah, what is... Then she felt it, a presence behind her. Not a sound, not a movement, just an overwhelming certainty that something impossibly old was standing directly behind her. Her heart hammered as she turned her head slightly, and then she saw it, just a glimpse, from the corner of her eye, a tall, shadow-wrapped figure towering over her, its cloak drifting as if underwater, its face pale but unreadable through the shifting fog. Two eyes gleamed like dying embers, cold, ancient, starved. Dracula. She spun fully to face him, stumbling backward, nearly falling into the fountain. The fog around him twisted like coils of smoke. He didn't step forward. He didn't raise a hand. He simply looked at her, and for a brief moment, she felt him inside her mind, searching, observing, recognized her fear like a scent carried on the wind. Then Noah blinked. A single, slow blink. Eleanor gasped. Dracula's head tilted slightly, as if he, too, noticed a movement. The boy's gaze drifted, not at Eleanor, but at Dracula. The boy didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't move. He simply nodded. A faint tremor passed through Eleanor's body. What does he want the children?" she whispered, though she wasn't sure who she was asking, Noah, Dracula, or the fog. Dracula raised one hand slowly, and Noah slid off the fountain, walking toward him as though he were sleepwalking. When the boy reached him, Dracula rested a pale hand atop his head, and the fog brightened just for a moment, as if reacting to a surge of power. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. This was an abduction. This was a reunion, a ritual, a calling answered. The children weren't victims. They were connected to him. And tonight, he had come to claim what silence had kept hidden for generations. The fog churned like a living ocean as Dracula stood motionless, one hand resting gently on Noah's head. The boy's eyes fluttered, not in fear, but in a trance-like surrender, as though something ancient had reached inside him and pulled him toward its source. Eleanor watched, frozen, every muscle tight with terror. What she had always assumed were harmless oddities of Alderwood's children now felt like the pieces of a nightmare assembling themselves into something unmistakably real. Noah's mouth opened slightly, as if he wanted to speak. Instead, a soft vibration trembled through the air. It was faint, barely detectable, but Eleanor heard it not with her ears, but through her bones. It resonated deep within her chest, like a low hum from beneath the earth. Dracula turned his gaze on her. His eyes were impossible to read, ancient, depthless, and filled with something she couldn't name. Not hunger, not anger, but recognition, as if he had seen her long before she was born, long before Alderwood had been built, long before the forest had grown thick around it. The fog parted again, and more children appeared. 6 of them, then 9, then 12, stepping out from different corners of the village square. Some still wore their pajamas. Some held small toys that dangled from limp fingers. None of them blinked. None made a sound. They formed a half circle around Dracula, their feet moving in unison, guided by something invisible that linked them together. Eleanor's breath faltered. This wasn't chance. This was choreography, a ritual rehearsed across generations. Her voice broke when she finally managed to speak. No, this can't be happening. This isn't real. But the children kept walking, their steps soft yet synchronized, their faces blank and glowing faintly under the lantern light, filtered through fog. The silence was suffocating. Not even an owl hooted, not a branch cracked. It was as if the entire world held its breath. Dracula lowered his hand from Noah's head and stepped back. The children's eyes locked onto him, their expressions empty yet obedient. Then, slowly, they all fell to their knees, every single one, bowing their heads toward him as though greeting a long-awaited king. Eleanor stumbled backward. "No, stop. Someone wake up. Somebody help." Her voice disappeared in the fog as if swallowed whole. Dracula spoke for the first time. Not aloud. His voice echoed directly inside her mind, cold and resonant. "They were never yours." Eleanor gasped, clutching her temples. The words weren't painful, but they were invasive, like a memory forced into her brain. She felt the weight of centuries within them, heavy with truth. Dracula stepped among the children, and just his presence seemed to darken the fog around him. When he reached a small girl, Leah Miller, he crouched, his cloak encircling her like wings made of smoke. Eleanor whispered, "What are you doing to them?" A soft sound escaped one child's lips. Not a scream, not a cry, but a whisper of air. For a moment, Eleanor thought it was a voice, but then she saw it. A thin white mist drifting out of their mouths, rising slowly into the air. Breath, but not normal breath. It shimmered faintly in the darkness, twisting upward like the release of something imprisoned inside them. The silence wasn't just a curse. It was containment. The children's inability to scream wasn't a symptom. It was a lock. And something inside them was unlocking now. Leah's eyes rolled upward as the mist left her tongue. Her small hand trembled, reaching blindly for Dracula's cloak. Eleanor's stomach twisted. She tried to run toward the girl, but the fog thickened instantly, blocking her path. It was like walking into wet cement. Dracula lifted Leah's chin gently with 2 fingers. The sight was unbearable, monstrous and tender all at once. Eleanor's heart slammed against her ribs. Why them? Why children? His eyes turned to her again, unblinking, and his voice echoed in her mind. Because they carry the silence of those who came before them, and silence is power. Eleanor shook her head violently. No, they're just children. The fog pulsed around her as if reacting to her defiance. Dracula rose again, the children still kneeling before him. Noah looked up, his blackened pupils swirling as though stirred by an unseen tide. Then, without warning, the children spoke. All of them, at once. 16 voices whispering in perfect unison. Not with fear, but with eerie devotion. He has returned. Eleanor's knees weakened. The whispering grew louder, vibrating through the fog, through the ground, through her skin. He has returned. The phrase wrapped around her like cold ropes. Dracula extended one hand toward the children, not touching them, but commanding them with an invisible force. They lifted their heads in sync, eyes glowing faintly. The fog responded, twisting upward like a spiraling tower around Dracula. The wind, or something pretending to be wind, howled through the square, bending branches and rattling shutters. The children's mouths opened wider, and Eleanor felt the truth hit her like a blow. They weren't calling Dracula. They were welcoming him. The silence of generations had been preparing them for this night, and it had only just begun. The fog tightened around the village like a closing fist. It swallowed the streets, the rooftops, the trees, everything except the circle where Dracula stood surrounded by Alderwood's silent, kneeling children. The air pulsed with unnatural energy, a vibration that seeped into the stones beneath Eleanor's feet. She tried to step back, but the ground felt soft, almost breathing. The village itself seemed alive, reacting to Dracula's presence like a host welcoming an ancient parasite. Eleanor's heart thrashed in her chest as she stared at the children. Their faces were blank, emotionless, their eyes wide as if they were looking at something she could not see. The fog spiraled around them, drawn into a vortex above their heads. Whatever was happening was building, growing, becoming. From inside one of the houses nearby came a sudden crash. A door swung open violently, and Mrs. Thompson stumbled out, her robe half-tied, her face pale with panic. "Noah! Noah!" she cried, her voice cracking through the mist like a desperate blade. Eleanor spun toward her, relief flooding her chest. Someone else was awake. Someone else could see this. Mrs. Thompson. Eleanor called out, racing toward her, but the fog moved faster. A massive wall of white surged upward between them, swallowing Eleanor's voice before it traveled more than a few inches. Mrs. Thompson didn't hear her. She rushed into the square on trembling legs, spotting her son kneeling at Dracula's feet. "Noah, baby, get away from him," she screamed. For the first time, one of the children reacted. Noah slowly turned his head toward his mother. His expression didn't change. No fear, no confusion, no recognition. Just a calm, hollow stare. "Noah, come here right now." "Mommy's here," she begged, stepping closer. "Come to me?" He didn't move. Dracula's cape fluttered slightly, though there was no wind. Mrs. Thompson froze mid-step as the temperature dropped sharply around her. She hugged her arms to her chest. purple mist pouring from her lips as she exhaled. Eleanor ran toward her, fighting against a fog that resisted her every step. "Mrs. Thompson, don't get any closer." But the mother moved forward anyway, desperation drowning caution. "Who are you?" she demanded at the towering figure. "What have you done to my son?" Dracula's head tilted slowly, as though studying a curious insect. Then his eyes darkened, deep, endless wells that reflected no light. When he spoke, it wasn't through sound. The fog carried the words, shaping them directly into her mind. "He is returning to what he was meant to be." Mrs. Thompson shook violently. "Stay away from him." She lunged forward, reaching for Noah's arm, and that was when the children reacted as one. 16 small heads snapped toward her in perfect unison. So fast, so sharp, that Eleanor stumbled back in horror. Their mouths stretched open slightly, releasing a single collective breath that spiraled into the fog like a cold, silent scream. Mrs. Thompson froze mid-motion. Her eyes widened. Her hand trembled inches from Noah's sleeve. No, what is—" Her voice disintegrated as the breath they released, this eerie, shimmering vapor, wrapped around her arm. Her skin paled instantly, veins darkening beneath the surface. She staggered backward, clutching her arm in disbelief. "And my arm, I can't feel." Eleanor finally reached her, grabbing her shoulders. "Come with me now. We have to get out of the square." But Mrs. Thompson was staring at Noah, terrified, broken, unwilling to leave without him. "Noah, please, you're scaring me." Noah blinked once. Behind him, Dracula stepped forward, the fog gathering around his form like armor. When he spoke again, Eleanor felt the words slam into her like a shockwave. "You cannot protect them." Eleanor shouted back, adrenaline overpowering her fear. "They're children. Let them go." Dracula's gaze shifted to her, not with anger, with interest. The fog curled around his feet like obedient creatures, and he moved toward Eleanor and Mrs. Thompson. Every step he took hummed through the ground, vibrating the cobblestones. Eleanor pulled Mrs. Thompson behind her, instinctively shielding her. The fog thickened again, swirling upward into the shape of something. Almost human, almost shadow, almost alive. Mrs. Thompson screamed. The sound cut short as the fog rushed into her mouth, silencing her instantly. Her eyes rolled back. She collapsed. Eleanor caught her, lowering her gently to the ground. No, stay with me, please, please." Mrs. Thompson's lips moved silently, but no sound came out. Her screams, her cries, were gone, taken, the same way they had been taken from the children generations ago. Dracula reached them, standing over Eleanor with an expression that felt like centuries of judgment condensed into a single stare. His voice echoed again. "The silence is not cruelty. It is inheritance." Eleanor's breath faltered. Inheritance of what? Dracula leaned closer, his eyes burning like dying stars. "Of me?" The fog pulsed like a heartbeat, each wave tightening its grip around Alderwood as if the village itself were suffocating. Dracula stood before Eleanor, towering and impossibly calm, his cloak billowing though the air was thick and unmoving. Behind him, the children rose to their feet in unison, silent, breathless, waiting. Their bodies were small, but their presence felt enormous, as if something far older looked out from behind their eyes. Eleanor clutched Mrs. Thompson's limp body, her own breaths uneven and shallow. The weight of what she had just witnessed, Noah's cold stare, the fog entering Mrs. Thompson's mouth, Dracula's chilling claim, pressed down on her like an avalanche. The silence around her was not absence. It was force, power, a language spoken without sound. She forced her voice out through trembling lips. "What do you mean of you?" Dracula stepped closer. Eleanor felt the temperature drop, frost beginning to form along the fabric of her coat. His presence was suffocating, but not because he threatened her physically. The horror came from how natural he seemed here, how the fog bent around him like a servant, how the earth seemed to recognize him. "Alderwood," Dracula said, his voice echoing directly inside her mind, "was not built on sacred ground, it was built on mine." Eleanor's pulse hammered. He lifted one pale hand and gestured toward the forest. The fog parted slightly, revealing massive blackened tree trunks, older, thicker than the rest. Eleanor had walked these woods many times, but she had never seen these particular trees. They looked dead, hollowed, yet she felt something beating inside them like distant drums. Centuries ago, Dracula continued, I came to rest here, not to hunt, to hide. His eyes shifted toward the children, who watched him with eerie reverence. The villagers found me, wounded, fading. Eleanor swallowed hard. And they helped you? Dracula's lips twitched, not a smile, but something colder. No, they feared me, trapped me, believed my silence would end my existence. The fog shuddered around them, reacting to the memory. But silence, he said, does not destroy. It transforms. The children stepped closer in perfect formation, their small bodies moving with unnerving synchronization. Leah Miller stood at the front, her eyes glowing faintly beneath the fog's reflection. She lifted her hand, slowly, delicately, and pointed toward the forest. Eleanor followed the gesture. Something was emerging from the trees. Shapes, small, human, children, dozens of them, walking silently out of the forest, their faces pale, their movements stiff. Their clothes were worn and tattered, as if they had wandered for years. Eleanor's stomach twisted as she recognized them not from the village now, but from the past. The lost children of Alderwood. Every story, every legend whispered about them. Children who disappeared without a trace generations ago, with no screams, no struggle. Eleanor stepped backward, her throat tightening. This isn't possible. Dracula's voice coiled through her mind like smoke. They were taken to preserve the silence, to preserve me. The lost children formed a second circle behind the ones from the village, rows of hollow-eyed, silent ghosts of Alderwood's history. Eleanor felt the ground tremble beneath her feet, the mist vibrating with an ancient, restless hunger. The living and the lost stood side by side. 2 generations, 2 eras, 1 purpose. Eleanor's voice cracked. What do you want with them? Dracula lifted his chin. The fog swallowed the space around him, rising like a column of shifting white. Their silence was a covenant. Their blood is a key. Their inheritance is me. Eleanor's heart plummeted. No, you're lying. They're just children. Dracula's eyes burned with an ancient, merciless truth. Children hold the purest echoes of life. In silence, their souls remain untouched, unscarred, unbroken. He extended one hand outward. The children responded instantly, their mouths open, not in screams, but in perfect, breathless unity. White mist poured from them, hundreds of thin streams rising like souls torn from shadows. The mist spiraled upward and merged into a swirling mass above the square, glowing faintly with an eerie, spectral light. Eleanor felt her knees weaken. The air buzzed with impossible energy. The mist thickened, twisting into something shaped like a heart, beating, pulsing, alive. Dracula closed his eyes, absorbing the light as though feeding. Mrs. Thompson stirred suddenly on the ground beneath Eleanor. Her fingers twitched, her chest heaving shallowly. Eleanor held her tighter. Stay with me. Stay with me. Dracula's gaze shifted toward her once more. You cannot save them. I'll try, Eleanor whispered, tears burning down her cheeks. I'll try anyway. Dracula stepped toward her, and the mist above them pulsed harder, glowing brighter, sending a shock wave through the square that made every child lift their head in eerie anticipation. The ritual was reaching its climax. Alderwood's silence was ready to be reborn, and Eleanor knew that the wind scraped against the abandoned houses like fingernails on old wood, whispering the name of every child Dracula had ever taken. But tonight, the forest was too silent, an unnatural, suffocating stillness that made even the fog hesitate before moving. Amelia, bruised, trembling, and clutching her necklace of broken twigs like it was holy, stood before collapsed entrance of the underground chamber. Behind her, the children, pale, weak, but alive, waited for a signal that the nightmare had finally ended. It hadn't. A breath colder than the grave rolled through the trees. The air trembled. The ground vibrated as if responding to a heartbeat that did not belong to the living. Amelia knew before she turned. She felt him, his hunger, his rage, his ancient disappointment. Dracula was still alive. She turned slowly, and the shadows bent toward him as if bowing to royalty. His silhouette emerged from the darkness, tall, regal, terrifyingly calm, his cape gliding like smoke. But his eyes, those burning, ancient crimson eyes, were no longer hungry. They were furious. "You dare," he whispered, each word cracking the night open, "take from me what belongs to the silence." Amelia pushed the children behind her, though every instinct screamed to run. "They don't belong to you," she said, though her voice shook. "They never did." Dracula tilted his head, curiosity flickering across his face, as if he were observing a new species of bravery that fascinated him. He stepped forward, the earth darkening beneath his feet. "And yet," he said softly, "they never screamed. Not once. Do you know what that means, child?" Amelia didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind was a storm of fear and adrenaline. "It means," he continued, "they already belong to the night." The children whimpered behind her. Some clutched her clothes. Some covered their ears. One prayed under his breath. But Amelia did not step aside. "You can't have them," she whispered. Dracula smiled, not cruelly, but with a kind of ancient pity. "I have crossed centuries to collect silence," he said. "I will not leave without them." He raised his hand. The forest bent backward, as if sucked by a vortex. Trees cracked. Leaves spiraled in reverse. Shadows stretched like monstrous claws. But Amelia, with shaking fingers, grabbed the silver shard she had taken from his lair, a piece of a long-forgotten weapon, buried by hunters centuries before. It was the only thing he feared. Dracula's eyes widened for the first time. "Where did you—" Amelia lunged. The silver shard burned like a star as she drove it forward. Dracula moved faster than the air itself, but the children, despite their fear, screamed her name at once, a sound so sharp and sudden it disrupted his focus. Just enough. The shard sliced across Dracula's chest. The forest imploded with sound. He roared, not like a beast, but like a collapsing cathedral, a sound so powerful it knocked Amelia backward and sent the children tumbling. Light burst from the wound, cracking his body like stained glass. He staggered, grasping at the wound, disbelief overtaking his fury. "You," he choked, "you broke the silence." For a moment, one horrifying, suspended moment, it seemed as if Dracula would strike back, destroy them all, take every soul in the forest as revenge. But his form flickered, first his hands, then his chest, then his face, ancient, angry, immortal, shattered like ash in the wind. And the night swallowed him whole. The forest exhaled. The shadows withdrew. The wind returned, timid at first, then stronger, washing the clearing clean of Dracula's presence. Amelia collapsed to her knees, shaking, sobbing, unable to believe the nightmare was finally over. The children gathered around her, touching her shoulders, hugging her, whispering her name like she was the only light left in the world. When the villagers arrived, torches in hand, eyes wide, breath frozen, they found Amelia standing with the children in her arms, covered in dirt and tears, but alive. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like a survivor. And that was enough. In the weeks that followed, no child in the village slept alone. Doors were locked. Candles burned until dawn. And every night, parents told their children the story of the girl who broke the silence. But Amelia never forgot one thing. When the wind blew just right, when the night was too still, when the shadows leaned in a little too far, she could still hear his whisper, "This is not the end." And she knew, deep down, Dracula was not gone. He was waiting,